Hi, and welcome to What's for Dinner, where I do my part to end global warming by eating all the cows that are farting up the atmosphere. Tonight we'll be cooking oven-roasted beef short ribs with roasted red potatoes and vegetables, and we'll be making a pan sauce at the very end for everything. We'll be using all the ingredients you see on screen now, and if you ever want to find an actual recipe that you can follow along with, please check the description down below. There'll be a link to the Fire and Steel website where you can find everything step by step. So to start this recipe off, we're going to need a cast iron skillet, and my cast iron skillet, as you can see here, it's seen better days. So we're going to try to kind of rehab it really quickly. I'm going to add in just a little bit of cooking oil. This is my regular grapeseed oil. And we're going to add in some kosher salt. Now the idea here is we're going to use the salt as an abrasive and the oil as a lubricant, and then scrub this layer of oxidation of rust right off the top of this pan. So with the oil and salt in the pan, we're going to go ahead and grab a paper towel and then just begin scrubbing. The idea is to use pressure and the salt to kind of scour away that top layer of funk. And you can see after about maybe 2 minutes worth of work, you get this just nasty black grime. But once we rinse it all away and then dry the pan out, it looks almost as good as new. I won't say quite as good as new, but almost. So these are not beef short ribs, if you noticed. These are beef chuck riblets. I've never seen this product before, and I decided to give it a chance. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're gonna make this with actual short ribs, it'll turn out much better. So after giving them a quick rinse, I'm going to go ahead and dry them off because we're going to sear these in the oven. And that's not going to work very well if the outside of the ribs is wet. So before we go put them in the oven to sear, I do want to add a little bit of base flavor, and this will help tenderize the meat just a little bit as well. But really it's there to help promote caramelization, and this is just some tomato paste. So we're going to rub that into the meat and then sprinkle some salt and pepper on top pretty liberally. You want to use a decent amount because this is going to be the base seasoning for the meat. I didn't put too much tomato paste on the bottom because, as you saw, the bottoms of these things are just, it's just all connective tissue, so there's not anything really there that you're going to actually eat. The top got more tomato paste and a little bit more salt as well. So once the ribs are nice and seasoned up, we're going to go ahead and place these right on the rack of our oven, and then we'll place a sheet pan below to catch all the drippings. Now, this is a disclaimer. You have been warned. If you do this, you will make a lot of smoke. You will smoke out your kitchen, you will smoke out your house. If you do not have a very large exhaust fan that can take care of that, I recommend you don't do this, or you're going to find out whether or not you have a good smoke alarm. So again, if you don't have the ventilation for this, skip this step and just keep moving on. After about 30 or 40 minutes in the oven, here you can see our ribs do look really nice. Again, that oven searing process comes with some risks, but it does produce a really nice product. So I'm organizing these in the pan because we're going to finish cooking everything in this one cast iron skillet. And I've got the pan drippings off to the side that we're going to use in just a moment on these potatoes. So about a 2-pound bag of small red skin potatoes. It wasn't quite as much as I thought, so I'm going to hit it with just a little extra oil as well, and then some salt and pepper. And then we're going to toss all that through and then add it to the pan. This is what we're going to do for pretty much the remainder of all the vegetables. While this recipe does take a long time to cook, it's actually really easy to prep. So before doing the rest of the vegetables, I wanted to go ahead and add in the rosemary now. The reason for this is I want the rosemary to kind of contact the meat directly, and I also want it to kind of get buried under the other vegetables so it doesn't burn. So here you can see the carrots are just kind of rough cut in 1-inch pieces. Same thing, oil, salt, tossed, and then we're going to go ahead and add it to the pan as well. You can see that I'm kind of organizing the carrots a little bit. I'm going to do this with all the rest of the vegetables as well. I don't want to just dump them on top. I kind of want there to be a little method to the madness. This is especially true with the celery and the onions next because these are aromatics and I want them to be evenly spread through so that the flavor that they provide as they cook really kind of gets to all parts of the dish. You must make sure you drop at least 3 pieces of celery, 4 if you're really good at it. And again, I'm just going to make sure that all the celery kind of gets worked through, kind of hide some of it down inside the center, some in the cracks. Again, I want to spread that flavor around. Now for the onions, we're actually not going to toss these in the bowl because they will fly apart into many, many pieces. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and peel each of these 3 onions and then just cut it into quarters. I'm going to leave them pretty large because they're going to soften up through the cooking process. Again, with the celery, I wanted to make sure it's evenly distributed, so I kind of put one in each corner, and then I kind of tucked an onion under each rack of ribs as well. Finally, we're going to stud the whole pan with some garlic. This seems like a lot of garlic, but it's worth keeping in mind that when you don't cut garlic up, the flavor isn't nearly as intense. So roasting whole, it won't be quite as strong. It seems like a lot, but it's not. And finally, we are done. So I'm gonna just give the whole pan one last seasoning. This is because the onions and the garlic didn't really get a whole lot of salt on them. And then I'm gonna hit it with some more black pepper because this is the kind of dish that likes a lot of black pepper. Finally, before it goes in the oven, I'm gonna go ahead and just add some butter throughout. This is about half a stick, just cut into pieces. This is just for extra flavor, and because the ribs are a little on the lean side, there's not a lot of fat in those, and that actually becomes a bit of a problem later on for me. Here you can see it's noticeably later. I believe they've been in there for about 2 hours now. And it's a little darker out, but they're not really that much more tender. I'm not able to handle it very well because it's so hot, but you can see the meat's still pretty tough. I tried to poke the tongs into one of the potatoes to see how soft they were, and they weren't that soft either. Which, that's not really a surprise. I'm just kind of gauging where we're at this point. I did notice the ribs drying out, so I thought this would be a good time to baste the whole pan with some red wine. This is Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is my preferred red cooking wine. I find it's the right combination of flavorful, and it's a little dry, but not too dry. Really dry wines tend to lend that flavor to the food that you put them in, and kind of gives it a tart, acrid flavor that I'm not a huge fan of. So we'll put the pan back in the oven. We'll come back about another hour later, and you can see the ribs are starting to get even darker. You can kind of see that they're drying out, which again is because they're so lean, but they are starting to get tender. And you can see the meat inside actually is still pretty moist. The outside's dry, but the inside's moist. Here I'm just rotating all the ribs around. Again, I don't want one side to be facing out the whole time because I don't want one side to get too dry. We'll baste it one more time with some red wine and then back in the oven. So here, finally, the ribs are completely tender. I did check them for tenderness before I decided to pull them off. We'll go ahead and get all the veggies and the potatoes out as well, and we're just left with this pan just full of delicious juice. Use tongs because the pan's very hot. Organize it and get it over medium-high heat. You can see it sizzling away. That's good. Let it sizzle for just a little bit just to get rid of any moisture that may be in the pan. And then we're going to add in maybe a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of flour. Now, when you go to stir this in, the flour is not going to seem like it's going to go away. You feel like you've made a mistake. I promise if you keep stirring and keep whisking for about 2 to 3 minutes, that flour will smooth out. And this is important because you want to cook the flour a little bit anyways to remove that raw flavor. So next we're going to go ahead and add in the red wine. This is going to be the kind of majority flavor of this sauce. Now, I kind of cut away a little fast here, but you do want to let this simmer for about maybe a minute or two because you want to boil off all that alcohol. If you don't, the sauce is going to taste really sour and kind of dry and unpleasant. So here you can see it's kind of getting a little bit too thick, so I decided to water it down a little bit. This is just to kind of save the consistency. I don't want it to become super dry and pasty. And here you can see that it's got a really nice consistency right now. But upon tasting it, I realized that there's pretty much no seasoning in there. The flavor is great, but there's no salt. Instead of just adding regular salt, however, I decided to add some chicken base. Chicken base is ostensibly chicken stock that's been cooked down to a paste, and it adds not only a good amount of salt, but a little bit of flavor as well. I'm going to back that up with some more fresh ground black pepper, and then keep stirring through. Now again, as the cooking process goes on, the sauce is beginning to dry out a little bit. This is why I kept the cup of water on hand, just so I can kind of touch it back up and get the consistency where I want it. And when making any kind of sauce like this, you must make sure to always be nice to your dog and also taste it frequently. I tasted it again. It was still a little lacking in seasoning, so just a little bit more of the base was all it needed. Here I'm going to finish the sauce with some room temperature butter. The heat is actually off underneath this pan. I'm just going to drop the butter in, give it a quick stir through, and that adds a nice kind of richness to the sauce that really gives it a nice finish. So with the sauce done, we go ahead and turn our attention to actually building our plate. I figured the full 4 bones was just a little unwieldy for a nice family dinner. So I cut those down into 2 bone pieces, and then we'll rebuild them on the plate, add some potatoes, add some vegetables, and we will go ahead and drizzle over our wonderful, wonderful sauce. As always, please like, favorite, share, comment, subscribe, do all that really good stuff. All of it is really, really helpful. And as always, I thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.